Many years later, as he was pulling his drowning son from the sea, he remembered her face. The story goes that Asmund Lerdahl fell in love with the L'Inconnu de Seine the moment he saw her face. In the 1920s, he was a student in Paris, studying to be an artist and sculptor, and he immersed himself in the culture of that time, much of which was getting drunk on wine and trying to take women home. And it was on a night when he had failed to convince a woman to come home with him that he set out to find a prostitute. On his way, he passed the Paris morgue, where he saw the face of a beautiful woman hanging in the window. The face was the Inconnu de Seine, a mysterious woman who had drowned nearly a half-century before in the Seine. As the story goes, he longed to kiss her face, and more than a century later, hers is the most kissed face in the world. And chances are, if you've had a CPR class, you've kissed her too. The history and development of the CPR dummy is oddly poetic. It's a story of unrequited love, of death and triumph over death, of folklore and science, and of suicide and immortality. According to the American Heart Association article updated March 8, 2012, the AHA trains more than 12 million people every year to perform CPR. And millions more learn worldwide thanks to Asmund Lerdahl, the CPR dummy, and the Inconnu de Seine. So today we'll learn about the history of the Inconnu. We'll learn a little bit about the development of cardiopulmonary resuscitation. And finally, we'll see how the CPR dummy came into being. The origin of the CPR dummy begins in Paris in the 19th century. The Inconnu de Seine, meaning the unknown woman of the Seine, is a legend constructed around a corpse. In the late 1880s, according to legend, the body of an unknown woman was found near the Seine, drowned in the river. Near the Louvre, rather. According to an article by Anja Zeidler, accessed March 31st, 2012, a medical assistant at the Paris morgue, being so affected by her beauty, made a death mask of her face. Many copies of the death mask were produced. Death masks were common at the time. They were usually commissioned by loved ones, and they were made by making a mold of the dead person's face and then making a plaster cast. So the copies made their way around Paris and became very popular to hang in houses, especially in Bohemian society. And as she made her way around Paris, the legend of her death became more and more profound. The most popular myth was that she was from out of town and that she had fallen in love with a man who jilted her and that she committed suicide. And it follows because her body had shown no signs of struggle or violence when she was found in the river. With time, her face and her legend became subject matter for artists, writers, and philosophers. Albert Camus, among others, compared her face to that of the Mona Lisa in that she bore such an enigmatic smile. Had cardiopulmonary resuscitation been around at the time she was found in the Seine, the Inconnu might have been able to explain her real story, but it would be years before CPR took shape. CPR as we know it was developed and honed in the 1950s, but elements of it began centuries before that. According to a Lifesaver Education article published on June 9th, 2010, the groundwork for CPR was laid in the 18th century. In Holland, the Society for the Recovery of Drowned Persons was formed in 1767, and they set about to educate the public on how to revive a drowned person. They came up with several good ideas, one of which was mouth-to-mouth resuscitation or rescue breathing, but also had several other horrible ideas like bloodletting and blowing tobacco smoke in the drowned person's face. By the 1950s, efforts were made to test and develop a truly effective form of resuscitation. According to an article from the Safer Center for Resuscitation Research, accessed March 31st, 2012, Dr. Peter Safer, among others, developed the technique that we use today for mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Elsewhere in the 1950s, other doctors were working on the compressions used for reviving the heart. And by 1960, they were combined to become cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Safer became devoted to educating the public on how to perform CPR. But he knew that it would have to be practiced to be learned, and you couldn't practice on a human body without it being very dangerous and potentially deadly. So, a colleague of his put him in contact with Asmund Lerdahl. Asmund Lerdahl, having left Paris many years before, came back and became a toy maker in Norway. And in 1940 is when he founded the Lerdahl Company, which made toys, and he was a pioneer in the early 50s in soft plastics. 2 years before he was contacted by Safer, the need for CPR became very present in his life when, according to an article by Gene Myers from December 11, 2011, while vacationing at the sea, Asmund Lerdahl's son was found floating in the water. Though there was no CPR at the time, he tried everything to revive him and somehow succeeded. And Lerdahl's son, Tor, went on to be president of the company. Lerdahl's experiences allowed him to compose the perfect CPR dummy. His experience as an artist gave him an eye for detail. His experience with his son left him devoted to developing a good human analog so that people could learn properly. And his experience with soft plastics allowed him to design and effectively produce this analog. For the face, he chose the face that he'd fallen in love with many years before, the Inconnu de Seine. He called his creation Resuscienne. And today it is the most produced CPR dummy of all time. And in fact, it's used the world over. Today we examine the history of the CPR dummy, of Resuscienne, and we found her beginnings as a real person, the Inconnu de Seine, in 19th century Paris. We learned the origin and development of the CPR dummy, and we looked at Asmund Lerdahl, who brought these elements together. If you find yourself taking a CPR class, forcing breaths into and pressing steadily on a hunk of plastic, show her some respect. She is a work of art. In fact, the woman you were trying to revive died over a century ago in Paris.